Going to wait just another couple seconds and then I'm introduce John Hughes and we'll get on our way here. But thanks for people joining, and we are going to keep you muted, and we are recording this as well. Keep things moving. My name's John. I work at the co-op. I want to welcome John Hughes and thank him for being here. He's one of our shareholders and community members. He graced us with his presence last year, and we wanted to invite him back for, I guess, an encore presentation and performance. We're very lucky and fortunate to have him here, and I hope you all enjoy your meal, and thank you for coming. And I will let John perform for us. Thank you, John, very much.
I can't see you, but I know you're there. Thanks for listening. I'll play one more song. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much, John Hughes, for the gift of your beautiful grounding music. What a great way to settle in and come together for this special day for our community, the once a year when shareholders get together to hear directly from co-op management and leadership about what's going on with the business and to learn and share about so many things that we care about. My name is Nadav Malin, and I'm your facilitator for this evening, your moderator. I'm honored to do this. And want to just mention a couple of things as we get started. First, there's a lot to talk about, a lot to cover. I really want to encourage everyone to listen fully with an open mind and with a trust in the good intentions of the speaker, even if you assume or feel like you might disagree with what they have to say. There's always something to be learned. So let's really listen to each other. Feel free to make robust use of the chat to share questions, comments, thoughts, encouragement. And we will be referring to the chat after the series of presentations for the Q&A portion. And if you please check your name in the Zoom window and make sure that the way you're listed there is the way you would want to be noted. For example, if you leave a question in the chat and somebody needs to get back to you afterwards with an answer, having your name in the chat the way you want to be identified is very useful. So sometimes we're using other people's Zoom accounts or have names that are business names or things in the chat. So please check for that. If you don't know how to change your name in your Zoom tile, the way to do it is just take your mouse, hover over your own tile, and there's a little three dots that pop up. And if you click on that three dot, a menu pulls down, and one of the options at the bottom of that menu is to rename yourself. So take advantage of that if you want to. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Judy to take us away.
Thank you, Nadav. Thank you so much. So welcome to you once again, Brattleboro Food Co-op shareholders. As of our most recent count, 159 of you have registered to participate this evening. And for 55 of you, this is your first annual meeting. So it's so wonderful to have so many of you participate. My role in tonight's meeting is to introduce you to our board, to our past people who are leaving, the current board, and our candidates, our future board. But first, appreciation is in order. We have all become accustomed, unfortunately, to meetings, and they are appearing more and more seamless, but the behind-the-scenes organizational nuts and bolts are daunting. Nadav, thank you for graciously agreeing to facilitate our second virtual annual meeting. Maybe we'll be in person next year. And a big thank you to Jen for co-facilitating and for tech support. And many thanks to Tabitha for facilitating our panel conversation. Bravo, once again, to the BFC annual meeting organizational team. John Hughes, I don't know what to say other than I am just so grateful that once again you shared your beautiful music with our co-op community. We are just so lucky to have you. Our delicious dinner, which I plan to have once my butterflies are out of my stomach, was lovingly prepared by Global Village Foods and the talented cooks in the BFC kitchen. Thank you so much for that. I've heard that it is delicious. And our co-op would be just a building without the hard work and the dedication of all of its employees who show up for us every day. A big shout out and virtual hugs to Sabine Ryan, our brave and brilliant general manager, who pulled us through another challenging year with flying colors. You'll hear more about that in her remarks this evening. As you know, the shareholders elect 9 board directors who will represent you and work on your behalf to steer this organization. One of the most important responsibilities of board directors is board perpetuation. We rely on a slate of capable and caring individuals to step up and make the commitment to support the co-op's growth and health. Each of us look to you, all 159 of you, as potential future board directors. This year, I had the opportunity to talk with quite a few shareholders about board service. So many of you felt that you just didn't have the chops. Well, you know what, really? All it takes is the desire to give back just a little bit more to the co-op. We're all just regular people who appreciate how important our co-op is in our community. And we want to make sure that our institution thrives. The board will continue to explore opportunities for you to deepen your experiences with the co-op and hope that you might consider running for a board seat in future years. This year, we have 6 open seats and 7 great candidates who have thrown their hats into the ring. The candidates will not be answering questions from shareholders tonight, so please be sure to read each candidate's statement of interest in the BFC website. Check in the chat so that you can see the link. Voting has begun this evening and will close on November 28th at 5 p.m. A huge thank you to the following candidates whose names you will see on the ballot: Calvin Dame, myself, Judy Fink, John Hatton, Michelle Muhlendyke, Jennifer Moore, Geraldine Wilson, and Johanna Zaunaritis. Thank you, folks, for running. And please join me in thanking board directors who are stepping down from the board or who have completed their term: Shanta Lee Gander, Joe Giancarlo, Stephen Gillum, Beth Neer, and Tamara Sten. We appreciate your dedication and commitment to our beloved co-op. And please say hello to our continuing board directors, Nick Dickinson and Denise Glover. Finally, please welcome my friend and colleague, Geraldine Wilson, Brattleboro Food Co-op Board President. Geraldine continues to work tirelessly on behalf of the Brattleboro Food Co-op, which means she has a full-time unpaid job in addition to her full-time job running a business. Welcome, Geraldine.
Thank you, Judy. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be serving an organization for which I care so deeply. My motivation to serve is fueled by the cooperative values that underlie the Brattleboro Food Co-op. Values that foster community, strengthen democracy, and support the economic and physical health of us all. We are indeed a grocery store, but I can surely say that as much as I love and rely on food, which was quite delicious this evening and I've already eaten, ensuring the successful future of our retail grocer wouldn't be a catalyst for my untold volunteer hours. It is really because we are a cooperative. And this annual shareholder meeting is the one time in the year, as Nadav mentioned, when we as owners of this business gather to hear from leadership how we are doing and to engage together in some aspect of our current work together. As for the latter, I'm looking forward to our panel this evening, which continues the significant focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So how are we doing? This annual meeting is a report to you, the shareholders, for the co-op's fiscal year July 2020 through June 2021. In other words, a period of time that ended 4+ months ago. And I'll speak to that 4 months in a moment. If you haven't already, I hope you will read the President's report in the annual report document. It really can't be emphasized enough the hard and challenging work of all co-op employees during this past fiscal year. I really don't think there has ever been a time with so much shifting of roles and responsibilities and challenging and demanding circumstances. Every one of us in this meeting tonight has been impacted in multiple ways by the pandemic, and our co-op continued to serve us throughout. For that, we are very grateful. And the co-op would not have so successfully served us without the leadership of our general manager, Sabine Ryan. Sabine's commitment to safety guided her decisions. Her dedication to serving our community established her priorities, and her well-honed understanding of the financial realities of retail grocery informed complicated and often competing needs for internal and external resources. You will hear from Tamara Sten, our board treasurer, a high-level picture of an amazingly successful financial year. The board witnessed firsthand how Sabine made thoughtful financial decisions that increased revenue, lowered the co-op's debt service, and acknowledged efforts of employees, all key to a thriving future for our co-op. And we are looking at, for the first time since 2009, a patronage dividend to shareholders. This is truly remarkable and not to be taken for granted on any level. So thank you very much, Sabine. So now for a bit of an update on the 4 months following the healthy close of the 2021 fiscal year. In July, Sabine sent and the board accepted her letter of resignation. She offered a commitment to work through the end of December. And although Sabine is responsible for hiring all co-op employees, the board is responsible for hiring the general manager. Over the last 4+ months, the board formed a general manager search committee, hired an executive search firm, as well as a seasoned consultant to support the considerable effort to find a new general manager. And if you've been reading the twice-a-month Food for Thought digital publication, you will have followed the search committee's activities. We've been meeting weekly since August, honing the qualifications that reflect what we and the employees see as the necessary skill set for a new general manager to be successful in our particular co-op, in our unique town and region. The executive search firm has been seeking potential candidates from all corners of the US, both within and outside of the cooperative sector. We are not the only food co-op in the market for a new general manager, it turns out. And among that group looking, we are larger and more complicated than most. The search committee is committed to presenting candidates to the board, managers, and employees that we feel have the potential to be successful at running our co-op. Finalists that meet the high standard we know is necessary to ensure the future of our co-op. And from those finalists, the board will make a hire. So please stay tuned to our updates as we have emphasized from the beginning, we are eager for your thoughtful input. And now I'd like to pass the mic to Sabine, for whom I have the utmost respect. Thank you for attending this evening.
Thank you, Geraldine. Congratulations all. You have survived nearly 2 years of life as we now know it under the specter of a pandemic. And your co-op has too. And in some ways, all of the difficulty and challenges have provided us with some significant silver linings. I would wager that you have found those upsides to be true in your lives as well. I don't want to steal our treasurer's thunder, but the main good thing for us is our financial performance. We are applying the cooperative principle of democracy and spreading the good fortune around to many of the major stakeholders in our cooperative, even while conservatively reinvesting in our business to continue to improve our services and our capacity. We've repaid almost 1/3 of the aggregate of shareholder loans. We paid gain sharing to our staff, and we are planning a modest patronage dividend disbursement in the next couple of months to all shareholders who shopped in fiscal 2021. Our challenge currently, as you probably have read or seen, is supply chain issues. There really seems to be no end to the new challenges that we have to learn to cope with in order to provide the best service we can in our store. I think this is the right moment to appreciate our staff. Because Although you have the inconvenience of not finding this or that product this week when you shop, they have had to adjust to expected orders not being delivered, sometimes with no communication before, during, or after the anticipated time of delivery. This affects buyers, receivers, stockers, and customers alike. And the buyers have had to adjust their patterns to various observed effects of ordering at the distribution centers, which are not always the stated policies. They have to find alternative products and alternative sources. Every one of those decisions requires entry and maintenance in the POS computer system, which impacts our IT department and our accounting department. And even though we know that you rarely read signs, we ask our graphics team to make more signs to try to keep you updated on the latest inconvenience. In short, they are all having to work harder and more frustratingly to get to where they hope the store to be. There's no way to properly be thankful to them for all of the upheaval that we are unfortunately getting more and more used to. But please join me in letting them know that they are appreciated. They have been through an awful lot in the last year and a half. And speaking of appreciation, let me take a moment to appreciate our board of directors. They've been moving through a bunch of transitions, and as you will see from your ballot, a few more are yet to come. But I have to say that each and every one of the directors who has left the board has contributed beautifully in their time on the board. We've had a couple of stellar young people who arrived at their board service through their work as AmeriCorps volunteers. Others answered the call to challenge our board to reach for better and to represent a wider swath of shareholders. And some have given many years of their wisdom to our organization. There are not too many opportunities out there for people to learn as much as our board members learn in the course of a board term, and to contribute in significant ways to a $23 million business. It's often a very interesting and committed group of people, and they do really good work. And now they're working hard to select this co-op's next general manager, going to great lengths to inform and involve as many as they can. Step up and join them. Make plans to come to a board meeting and see how it works. It will intrigue you. And finally, I want to thank all of you who cared enough to put your money into this organization as equity, to keep a community economic engine chugging along, whether it was 40 years ago or last week. To own and support a co-op is a revolutionary act in valuing a local business that goes about things differently and thoughtfully to make this town, this state, and this region a truly different and magnificent place to live. This is my last annual meeting as your general manager. It's been a wild ride, I won't deny it, but I know I'm leaving your co-op in a good place and with a solid future. We have a great staff and some fine board leaders. So let's keep this ship steaming ahead and doing good work for our community. Thank you.
And now we move to Tamara.
Okay, hi everybody. So it's been an honor being a board member for the last 3 years at the co-op, and the past year I've been the treasurer. When I'm not a treasurer on the board, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a professor of economics over at Landmark College. So it's kind of interesting, you know, being able to be the treasurer during this amazing, crazy time of transition and change. And, you know, it's just a case study within a case study, you know, all of the different things that we've been going through with the co-op. And like Sabine said, you know, it's turbulent times, you know, she's steering that ship. It's going through steady. And yeah, I've been so impressed by the way that we've been able to manage our budget, manage these uncertainties, make decisions that make sense. And if you look at the annual report, you know, some of the big numbers that we have, of course, is, you know, our big earnings this year, the fiscal year, we're at 1.47 in our $1 million in our earnings. And if we're looking at that, that's our net profit. So our net profit is after we've covered all of our expenses of employees, and our employees have been amazing this year. All of the expenses of Dottie's, and I'm going to talk about that too, and closing Dottie's and moving that into the space, our main space. The supply chain that you've heard everybody talk about, and the uncertainty of products and goods, and the changing of prices, and the different ways people are buying things. And for those of you that weren't tracking it, we now have online ordering through an app called Mikado. So that's a whole nother way that we're starting to sell product. So, and I'll go through these in more detail, but the bottom line is through all these different things sifting into our environment, we've come out with $1.47 million in the green. And what that also represents is, a lot of hard work. So our sales have increased from last year by almost 10%. So $23.4 million in sales. And at the same time, our margins have fallen. And in the grocery industry, it's one of the most competitive industries in retail. And that's because there's so many different markets and there's so many huge consolidated buyers now. If you think like Sam's Club and Walmart and even our local grocery stores, they have huge buying power. A lot of them have organic. And it's just an area where profit margins have always been slim, and we've kept them super paper thin. So I know sometimes people think the co-op is more expensive. We're a smaller operation. We don't have the huge buying power like big corporate stores might have, but we're very careful and very selective in how we choose our product and price it. And that's shown, okay? That's shown by us being able to keep our margins low, okay? 37.4% gross margin on our products. Operating expenses have also been lower this year compared to other years, which is amazing because if you think about all of the extra labor that our employees had to go through the pandemic, when we had curbside pickup, people had to get all that food together. When we had people ordering on the Mikado app, which brought in $122,000 in sales, that was all handpicked off the shelves by our employees. Our employees were amazing in helping to pull us through this entire time. Some other numbers I can throw out your way is, let's see, our commitment to community. Okay, we've had over 1,000 hours of shareholders. Okay, so employees were all in this together, right? Our shareholders also were amazing. Over 1,000 hours of shareholder volunteer time that was provided to 7 different community partners. You saw some of that on the slideshow. Discounts paid out to shareholders. Okay, so our working members get discounts. We've paid out over $553,000, more than $500,000 was paid back to the community. And we also paid $150,000 gain share to our employees as a thank you for the hard work. One of the big things, the clincher that we got here came from the government, okay? So for those of you who might not be aware, we have a program that the federal government had put together called the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP. And it was set up to help people when things were on lockdown during the pandemic, to help keep employees employed, to help keep businesses with their lights on when we had no idea what was going to be happening next. So the co-op ended up getting $867,000 from the government for that. And the greatest thing that happened in May is we were pardoned from having to pay that back. So that became part of our profit. But even without that money, our net profit would have been more than $500,000. Okay, so that money kind of helped throw us over the top, but we're already going in a good direction. So, and I guess that's about it. I'm going to leave things open for, questions and answers. Oh, there was one thing in the chat about Dottie's. So yeah, Dottie's, I was surprised too when Dottie's I was like, where's Dottie's in the co-op? I can't find it. It's on the bottom shelves, okay? And they're doing a really good job making stickers and tags and kind of revisiting that to make sure it's visible. So Dottie's is in the co-op. We ended up we saved some money by bringing Dottie's into the co-op, but that wasn't really the initial reason why we kind of consolidated Dottie's, and that was done before the pandemic. But we generated about $9,000 by selling off some of Dottie's equipment. And this is before we knew we were going to get government money. We also saved a chunk of change by not paying rent anymore for Dottie's, by having it all under one place. We also made it easier for shareholders because it's kind of like one-stop shopping, and Dottie's is still visible in the co-op. We also had to pay a lot of extra labor to bring Dottie's into the co-op too. So there wasn't, I don't know, it was a good decision financially for the co-op to have everything kind of consolidated under one spot. And yeah, and it's just kind of part of this effort that we've been making to really consolidate things, makes things clear, available, and accessible to everybody. So I'm going to leave it at that. Folks are welcome to ask more questions. And
All right, thank you, Tamara. That was great. Thank you, Sabine. Thank you, Geraldine and Judy. And everyone here, now it's your turn. Please use the chat. Send your questions to everyone. So not just to a panel or to a moderator, but to questions. We want everything to be open and transparent. Send your questions to everyone in the meeting. And yeah, let's hear what people have to say. I will direct questions as best I can. Sabine and others will help me figure out who's the best person to answer them. And of course, people who just want to have comment on things, you're welcome to use the chat for that as well. So we have our plan now is to go until 6:45 with the Q&A, and then we'll turn it over to Tabitha and the amazing panel that we have assembled. So Spoon, I see you with your hand up. If you're not able to put your question in the chat and would like to speak, let's see if it looks like you've been unmuted. So yes, go ahead.
For Tabitha, I guess, how much money, how is the amount of the total amount? Well, explain a lot more about the rebate. How is it determined? How much money will probably be distributed? And anything else that can illuminate that?
Sounds like, thank you, Spoon. That sounds like that's for Tamara and or Sabine about the distribution to shareholders.
right. So what we're looking at is the patronage dividend. And I'm actually going to let other folks talk about that a little more because that's an ongoing thing that's currently being developed. So as a treasurer, I'm looking at what's happened. And I'm also leaving the board. So this is my last meeting, guys. So I'm going to send this out to folks who are working more in the future to talk more about that.
So we're just, we're going to be rolling out all the details, Spoon, on that question of yours around patronage dividend next month. But the short answer is that the total dividend that will be declared will be, I believe, $600,000, 20% of which will be paid back to shareholders in the form of patronage dividends. And as you know, or some of you may not know, it's called patronage dividends because it's based on your patronage. So the folks that shop the most, use the co-op the most during the course of the year will receive a larger dividend than those who bought only a cup of coffee during the year. But nonetheless, all folks that use the co-op that are owners of our co-op will be receiving an appreciation for their support during the course of fiscal 2021.
Great, thanks, Sabine. Can you say a little bit more about where is Dottie's in the co-op? There's still people are still having trouble finding it, I guess, or want to hear more about how to find it.
So there are signed shelf tags that say Dottie's discount throughout the co-op. Many of the items are, as Tamara said, in the grocery section are on the lower shelves, but not all. Some are, in the dairy cooler, in the freezer or whatever, and are in other places, but we have tried to make them more visible. The items that people have not seen in the store that Dottie's used to carry were the short dated and damaged products. Both the source for that dried up and our capacity to manage it wasn't there. So we don't have those kinds of products in the store, but we've made a concerted effort to replicate every value priced product in the store, and have actually added to those over the course of the last year, from our largely from our conventional supplier, but from others as well.
Great.
And I just want to add, because I had a great meeting with John Megas Russell, who's introduced the Dotties to me. And the reason why they're put on the lower shelves, he told me, is so it's easier access for people to reach.
So yes, that may explain the fact that we don't have the damaged packages and the short dated products. That may explain what some people think of as the Dotties that they're looking for and not finding, but thank you. So look for the signage, look on the lower shelves. Thank you for that. Sabine, a question back on the patronage dividend is about nonprofits. Will nonprofits who are members receive a patronage dividend?
I'm not sure about that. I think most of the folks that I saw on our list were human beings. So I'll have to look at that.
All right. And then we want to hear a little bit more about the staff bonus and how that's worked.
So what we did last year at the end of the fiscal year was we paid staff an extra $1 for every hour worked in the store during fiscal 2021 up until the end of the fiscal year, if they were still employed at the end of the fiscal year. So that was our measurement. We gave out, I'm trying to remember, it was something like $150,000 in gain sharing to staff.
Thank you. And then a question about how would it look financially to bring the $15 minimum hourly wage to our co-op staff? Is this feasible?
It's definitely a goal, and we're working steadily towards that, and have a plan to do so at some point in the near future, but not this year.
And can you say any more about what the impact would be financially? Have you looked at that?
It's a very difficult question to answer because the wage has to do with an entry wage, and we have a lot of people who work here who have been here for a wide variety of time, and we have pay scales that reach up quite a bit more than $15. So it would be a calculation that would have to be done across the board. I can't really answer that question very well without a lot of analysis.
Thanks for trying. And here's another one. Since we are doing so well, when will we be able to move away from plastic packaging and adopt more biodegradable packages like the ones used at the Putney and Springfield co-ops?
Well, actually, we use a lot of biodegradable packages, and I'm not sure what the person's referring to, but most of the packaging that we have is biodegradable, with some exceptions. We just picked up some products that are recycled plastic that can be recycled as well. So there are different products that we use for packaging. As everyone who's interested in this topic knows, it's a very difficult process to be able to continue to clean up and reduce the amount of plastics that we use in a food operation. But we continue to try. We do have an added wrinkle right now, which unfortunately, I'm sorry to say it again, has to do with supply chain. Sometimes we have discovered that we have had products that have been replaced by our distributors. And in fact, in one case, it was noted by a shareholder who noticed that there was a product that was in the grab and go that was not the way it used to be. And sure enough, it was a different product with a different chemical makeup. So we're trying to keep up with that as best we can, and we'll continue to work at reducing as much as we can.
Super. Thanks, Sabine. So there's a question here with a little bit of a preamble, and I'm not sure I fully understand the suggestion, but I'm going to read it and see if you do.
Okay.
It's about Mercado. I'm sure many appreciate Mercado because of the online ordering option. From what I heard last week, there's no capability to give member discounts through that, which is an important perk to some. Although I do not use Mercado, is it possible to round up for those who find that as an incredible initiative as I do?
So this is a complicated question also because when one shops for one, there are additional costs involved in that transaction. And in many cases, online ordering includes additional costs to cover those types of services. We chose not to do that for curbside initially when we were taking orders on the phone or Mercado. So we are not tacking on additional fees from the co-op for providing that service. We also have not made it possible to receive your discount that way because it's an additional cost to provide the service. The discount would then further impact the co-op in that service. So it's not something that we've pursued for financial reasons.
Great. Sounds like that response was well received. Thanks. And then back on, I think this is a response to your explanation about the $15 minimum wage. Is the implication in that you want to avoid wage compression?
That is a situation that we have to pay attention to, yes.
All right. So I think we're caught up on the questions people have put in. Giving people a few minutes if they have more to say. Otherwise, maybe if our panelists and Tabitha are ready, maybe we could shift to that a little early. There's some appreciation here for the continuing curbside option. Thanks for that.
A question about labor shortage impact. I assume the full question is, have we had impact from the labor shortage? I think yes is the short answer. For a while there, we were having real trouble finding folks to fill open positions, especially during the summer. I'd say late spring and through the summer. We have observed over the last month, I would say, that positions are filling more rapidly now. And we actually have a few departments that up until recently were never fully staffed are now fully staffed, including, for instance, the front end. We continue to have some positions open in food service, but many fewer than we were struggling with through the summer. And I do say that partly to let you know how that's been, but also to express further appreciation for our staff that did a lot of extra work to cover for all the folks that were not filling positions at that time. So it was a rough summer, but we made it through pretty well and now are happy to have a pretty good situation for staffing, and we're grateful.
Thanks, Sabine. There's a comment in the chat about Dottie's, not a question, so I'll just invite people to read that on their own. Thank you for sharing that, Ruth. And I want to echo Sabine. I think what the board members and so many of the rest of us feel is tremendous appreciation for your service to the co-op over these years, and in particular through this really challenging time. I know you're still in the thick of it and still very busy, but I wonder if there's anything you're already feeling like you're going to miss the most from this role once you leave.
To be completely honest, I haven't focused on that at all. And partly it's just because there is a lot going on at the moment, and partly it's just because there will be sadness at leaving. There's no doubt, and there will be many things that I will miss. And probably the main thing that I will miss are some of my amazing coworkers and board leaders. So I feel very blessed to have been around some of the most fantastic people on the planet.
Regardless of how big the fire is.
Oop. Got a little unexpected interruption there.
Thank you, Nadav.
All right. Surely there must be other people with questions or thoughts for board management and leadership. Thank you, John, for sharing via the chat the graphic that people should look for if they're looking for the Dottie's products in the main co-op. So Barry's asking, did the question about biodegradable packaging get addressed? I think you talked to that, Sabine, but it sounds like maybe is there a little more you can explain about the different kinds of packaging and what goes into choosing those or the different options?
Well, so we do have quite a bit of biodegradable packaging in the packages that we use. Some of it is compostable. Some folks are not that thrilled with compostable products, but in fact, we do have quite a few compostable products if you have access to industrial composting. We also have some packaging that is recycled plastic that can then be recycled. So that's not ideal, but does speak to the cycle part that we've been missing in virgin plastic production. And then we definitely have virgin plastics as well. It would be hard to be a food store and not have some plastic associated with, meat and, deli food and things like that. But we try to reduce it as much as possible. And we work with our National Co-op Grocer Association to source some of those products through some local vendors. And finally, the other thing that I said about it is that we're having some trouble finding product now and then due to supply chain issues. Some of you may have noticed that the boxes in the deli, used to be orange and green, and this month they're brown. Well, so we had to source the same kind of product from a different distributor. So that's the kind of thing that we do all the time and will continue to do to try to reduce ultimately the impact of packaging as best we can.
Great. And then there's a question about if you could describe some of the diversity and inclusion initiatives that were launched and promoted this past year.
So we've been working with actually Tabitha Mosley, most recently, who you'll get to see shortly. And for those of you that attended the annual meeting last year, already got to know a little bit. We've done a variety of trainings with the management team with Tabitha after doing a number of things on our own. And currently, she just completed a survey to staff to try to understand where people were to begin to craft workshops and sessions with staff. And we're about to figure out the best way to launch those so that we can get maximum participation over the course of the next few months. So those are definitely where we've been focusing our attention most recently. When we first began our work with DEI, there were a lot of self-guided work that we did, and we worked with a trainer out of Minneapolis as well, LaDonna Redmond Sanders, to help us identify some of the things that we needed to work on. In addition to that, we've also started looking at how we name dishes and some of the ways that we may be offending folks. And so we're going to be going through that pretty carefully over the course of the winter, and start to address some of the other ways that we can correct some culturally less appropriate ways that we are presenting ourselves to our customers.
Great, thank you, Sabine. And with that, it's time. I believe that Tabitha's here. I hope the rest of the panel is ready or getting ready soon. And I wonder if you would like to introduce Tabitha and move us along to the next part of our meeting. So thanks everyone for the great questions. And thank you, Sabine, for great, thoughtful responses.
So soon we will be joined by Tabitha Pullmore, who has pulled together a panel of BIPOC entrepreneurs that the co-op is, well, you'll recognize most of them. And we've asked them, through her, to think about some questions about how we could better support BIPOC entrepreneurs as individuals and as a cooperative. So I'm very much of a fan of Tabitha's, and I believe that no matter what happens here, we're going to get a lot out of it. So I'm going to pass the baton to Tabitha. Thank you.
Thanks, Sabine. No pressure. Hi, everyone. It's great to see some of those faces again. It was great to see you last year and happy to be here again. As folks mentioned, we are going to be hearing from some of our amazing entrepreneurs who are people of color across Vermont who work either with you or in the food industry in general. Before we jump in, just quick, does anybody need a quick 2-minute break or anything? Are folks good? I don't know how long you've been sitting here. We're good to go? Okay, we're just going to hop right into it then. So, and one of our panelists may join us in a couple of minutes, but I'm going to go ahead and just give a very brief overview of who they are, because the first thing that they're going to do is just tell you about who they are and how they came up into the business that they've come up into and some of the things that they want you to know about what they do. So the first person I'd like to introduce you to, who many of you probably already know, is Amber Arnold. She is one of the co-directors of the Susu Community Farm in Brattleboro. I don't know if y'all can see Amber. And then also with us right now is Marlena Fishman, who is the co-owner of Zen Farm Boutique Cannabis Shop and director of Zen Barn Farm's social and environmental justice initiatives, and that is located in Waterbury Center, Vermont. Also joining us, and I don't know if he's on yet, is Earl Ransom, who is co-owner of Stratford Organic Creamery, located in Stratford, Vermont. That is a multi-generational organization that hopefully he'll be able to join us shortly. So that being said, welcome to our panelists. We're so grateful to have you here with us today and in Vermont, making sure that we are represented in all that we do. So thank you. First thing, and you can decide who goes first, Amber or Marlena. Just tell us a bit about you, how you came into the work that you're doing here in Vermont, and anything you want us to know about the work that you actually do.
I guess I can go first. My name is Amber, she, her pronouns here on the ancestral homelands of the Alnua Beniki people, sometimes called by the colonizer name of Brattleboro, Vermont. I came into the work that I do, I think, just by being born into it. Being born a Black person in America feels like, you know, connection to land, connection to earth, connection to food, connection to healing, connection to kind of like moving through all these processes is so deeply rooted in just like who I am as being a person. And so, yeah, I feel like that's really what it was for me. I care deeply about my people and all of us being able to access, you know, living in this space of liberation and this kind of culture. And so that has always really inspired me, and has guided me towards the work that I'm doing now.
Thanks, Amber. Can you tell us how long has the Susu Community Farm been in existence? And who else is part of it?
Yeah, so Susu has been, we started in October of 2020. We originally had an LLC, which was like a botanica. So we sold like Afro-Indigenous herbs and tinctures and remedies and did a lot of like trauma work, somatics and yoga and all that kind of stuff. And then as a response to COVID, to more Black and Brown people being murdered and violated, we responded to what our community was asking of us and what our people were needing. And that was access to food, to land, to earth, to being able to heal through all this trauma collectively. And so Naomi and I started a GoFundMe page that eventually turned into us creating the Susu Community Farm, which launched in October of 2020. And currently Naomi and I are the collaborative directors of Susu, and we have a few staff members right now, and we're growing. So we have Jamal, who is our CSA kind of like coordinator. Actually, he just went into a new role, which is kind of like youth belonging and place director. And we have Jess, who is our grant writer, development director. We have Hannah, who is our CSA volunteer coordinator. And we are hiring a few more people actually right now.
This would be a great place to put in a plug. And I did put your website in the chat so folks can, if you know people who would be a good fit for Susu, please, right, send them Amber's way. Amber, so I heard you talk about a couple of different things. Can you talk a little bit about how people would access Susu? If people of color, you know, how would they find access to you? And once they get there, what would they see or what would they be able to engage in?
Yeah, I mean, currently we, you know, during the summer, spring season, we have a CSA program that's free for Black and Brown folks in the community. And so this past year we were growing food on the Retreat Farms lands. And so we had lots of volunteers and people who would come by there. Right now we have like, we're doing mostly, we have like year-long programs. So we're kind of towards the end of those right now, and they're all remote. We're purchasing a farm, and that should go through January of this year, which is really exciting. And so once we're on the farm, we will have a lot of ways for people to come visit us. We'll have lots of like workshops and rituals and opportunities to like grow food and be in community and different stuff in that way. But right now we're mostly doing remote stuff until then.
That's amazing. Thank you. Is there anything else that folks should know about Susu as a whole right now? Or
oh, for me?
Yeah.
I think that's good.
Okay, good. I have a feeling that you're going to be getting some questions shortly. So we're, like I said, we're going to start with these 4 questions. And then as folks are talking, if you want to pop your questions in the chat, or like I said, we're going to leave a little bit of time at the end for people to ask questions as well. Either of those will work for us. Thank you, Amber. Marlena?
Amber, that was lovely. I was just taken all the way in. So I'm Marlena, co-owner of Zen Barn Farms, and what brought me into this industry is my love, has always been my love of herbs and plants and holistic wellness. And cannabis has been a part of my life for a long time. And I have always enjoyed just owning the fact of the healing benefits that I get from it, and have had the opportunity to expand on that in the past year with our CBD shop. And we first started growing on our family farm about 3 years ago, and tried it out in our food and our beverages and at our wellness studio, and got great responses and some good feedback from people, and decided to expand on it. And what brought me to Vermont was my husband's family's here, and when we had our first son, we wanted to be near family, so it was a choice between Jersey or Vermont, and we moved here together from DC. And in Jersey, my dad used to always keep this little flower bed garden right out the walkway of our house. And I didn't, at that time, I didn't jump in the soil with him because I had a fear of bugs. Now I have an appreciation for them. Fear is still in the back, but now I have appreciation for them. And then when we were in DC, I got to experience a lot of urban gardening, and got to become more familiar with my own wellness practices, having been out on my own at this point in time. So having come to Vermont after that, I immediately just embraced the opportunity to re-engage with the land and establish a new relationship with it that was stripped from our ancestors.
All right. And I really deeply appreciate the perspective that you're coming from, both of you, and the ways that it's not just, hey, I like this thing. It's deeply embedded in who you are. And so what you do is who you are. There's too many people in the workforce that aren't doing what they love, that aren't doing who they are. They're performing something versus living out a truth. And so I just wanted to acknowledge and appreciate that in both of you, what you're bringing here today. And so as we consider what that process, I mean, it's just such vulnerability to do who you are, to do what you are, and be so authentic. And so as you began this process of being so just in touch with yourself, with the land, with all that can come from this world that we live in, and you tried to fit into and make a living, right? Because that's what we ask people to do. When you were going through that process of starting up the business model, was there anything that came up for you as you were going through that was particularly frustrating, or just things that you learned along the way that you wanted to articulate in this space? And tell me if you need me to clarify that better.
I would say what came up for me is I always made a point to want to bring the in-between to the forefront, especially within the cannabis industry. And then when doing that, be it that I'm a Black woman, and especially I'll toot my own horn here and say I also look young. There's a certain, you can't just show up to the scene and expect that someone is going to listen to what you have to say. So having to first state all my years of experience and knowledge, and even my age at times, to then be able to share what I'm saying and have it be heard. And having it be heard isn't even enough. It's like, oh, what statistics do you have to go with your experience? And even though I'm sharing a firsthand experience of many people along with myself, someone asks for a statistic as if my word and my experience firsthand isn't enough. So, and that's just to enter a space and let them know what it is that I'm trying to do. I have to present all these other things first. And then it's a matter of removing the stigma around cannabis and all the propaganda that has been around the use of it and its healing benefits. Even the way it's talked about as a plant, it's broken up as hemp, weed, cannabis, and it's all one plant that's just being broken up into different stages that are categorized in different ways, which each aspect of the plant has different healing benefits. What I have noticed too, and wanting to have vendors in our shop, it's hard to even find the BIPOC distributors or the BIPOC businesses. And it's not because they're not out there, it's because it's the way that it's being marketed, what comes up first in a feed, and also what other people are sharing. So those are some of the initial barriers that aren't totally business related that come up.
Mm-hmm. And are there other barriers that you wanted to talk about that maybe are a little bit more business oriented? I think that everything that you said was so powerful. And even as you were starting, I could feel it like welling up in me. You're like, well, I come across as looking young, and I'm like, oh Lord, now she got to break out the credentials. Like I could just feel the exhaustion that I have felt, in having to do that every time we come out. We got, because Black don't crack is a blessing unless you're around white folks, and then it's about proving that you are who you are, right?
Right.
And I was really touched, like when you were talking about breaking up the cannabis plant. Do you feel like where do you feel like that comes from? Do you feel like that's because people don't know about all of the different healing properties that it has? Or do you feel like that's more a function of kind of how we tend to do things as a society in general? We can't appreciate the whole plant, or is it a necessary part of the business?
That's a great question, Tabitha. I think it stems back to the war on drugs. It's all a part of the propaganda, why it was called marijuana, to associate it with Mexicans. It's all connected, and breaking it up into different terms, if you will, that's more of the economic side. That's just part of just trying to bleed the plant for its economic purposes rather than its beneficial purposes. It's more around legislation than as a holistic practice in medicine. But to answer your question around an additional barrier is when I step into a space, and especially if I'm succeeding or learning in that space, I like to have others there to learn with me and to succeed with me and represent along with me. And in this space, there's so many people, BIPOC people in particular, that don't either feel nervous because they're going to be criminalized from it, or feel like they already have set up their market or whatever their livelihood is, and going to continue to try to navigate that space rather than take ownership in a space that we have popularized.
Say all of that. I feel like I'm at church. Thank you, Marlena. And Amber, do you want to respond to any of that, or do you want to go into kind of your own journey to becoming, the Susu Community Farm, and some of the barriers or things that you notice or that you have faced in that process?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, a lot of the barriers that I've seen personally, specifically towards Susu, is mostly gatekeeping. It's like we are people, like many Black and brown people, who have a dream, we have a vision, we have a very clear, we've spent like a couple hundred years like creating systems and ideas of how to make things, the way that would actually work and be meaningful and supportive. And then we are coming against these systems that are, intentionally keeping us from being able to create these spaces. Like, this is not by accident. Obviously, this is a very purposeful way of things happening. And so I think that that's, our biggest barrier. I think that there's a lot of laws and rules in place that make it illegal to do the kind of work that we want to do, caring for people. Like, caring for people is very illegal. There's lots of ways that make that very impossible to do. And I think that, we're going into these spaces of like, I think for many of us, like, the one thing that we really need is resources to be able to do the work we need to do, because we live in a capitalist culture. And in order to access resources, we then come into this place of like, oh, we now have to spend like 75% of our time trying to do fundraising, which takes us completely out of doing the work that we want to do, which is caring for our people, and that's what we want to spend our time doing. And then there's this whole language barrier of like, you need to write this way. And like, Marlena's talking about all of these statistics, and it's like, I'm a Black person. I don't need statistics. Like, I'm living this every day. I'm in community with people. Like, we are living this. Like, I don't need to like find some like fancy, rich, researchy white person to like find all these statistics about the people that I'm in community with every day to prove to someone who's completely detached from our community that we deserve to have access to our needs being met. You know, it's just like those kind of like barriers. And I think another thing even in that world that we've experienced is you know, there's a lot of like grants or funding opportunities that are kind of like centered around we want um we want to fund Black people doing Black work and blah blah blah. And so you're like, all right, sweet. And so you like write this whole thing and they're like, okay, well that doesn't really make sense to us. And it's like, well yeah, because what makes sense to you hasn't been working. And like this is like, we're not doing, you just want a Black person to do the stuff that like you were doing before that's not working. You don't want to actually support us in, you know, doing something new or different or, you know, that kind of thing. So I think a lot of the barriers that we face have just been racism, white supremacy, you know, like even the process of trying to purchase land, you're then having to deal with zoning and neighbors and all of these things where there's all these aspects of interfacing with people and their own personal beliefs that then have a huge impact on your ability to be in relationship with land or to, you know, do the work that you want to do.
It's like you have to almost traumatize yourself in order to create a sanctuary for us. Like you have to go through this traumatic process of dealing with a government that doesn't value us, with funders or potential partners who don't understand our ways of thinking, knowing, being, and doing in the world. So we have to create that crosswalk to translate to them because they're not going to naturally come over to us. Is kind of what I'm hearing a little bit. I may be putting my own spin on it. Feel free to, you know, correct me. So as you consider those things, right, the grant and the language in grants, let's talk about how long the grant process is for like $5,000. And oh, by the way, here are the 75 outcomes that we need you to track every month to prove that you're worthy within our systemic values, right? So as we consider these barriers and we consider all of these ways that systems are set up to promote themselves and this single image of, you know, what life should be like that is exclusive to us. Looking at Brattleboro Co-op, who has, you know, it's very well established. They have a lot of resources. What kinds of things could Brattleboro Co-op do, or people who are at Brattleboro Co-op, or because we know that some people here are on boards and, you know, things like that and have other jobs. What kinds of things could people do to support BIPOC-owned businesses like yourselves so that you are successful, so that those barriers are not the hindrance, so that you don't have to collect more trauma in order to heal and help people?
So with our business is a lifestyle brand, so I like that I was able to generally like bring myself here. It's sometimes hard for me to be vulnerable, even though we're out there in our business. And this, I feel vulnerable in the moment. I'm just going to say that. There's a lot of faces on on the screen, but it's a matter of, for us, making people feel good and also doing good. So the ask that I would say is the same thing that Amber and I are offering to our community, the healing and the wellness that we're offering into our community and trying to find access to funding and representation. So with that, what we do at Zimbar Farms is 1% of our sales goes to a social or environmental justice cause. Right now, we're donating 1% of our sales to the Loveland Foundation, which is a BIPOC mental health organization, and they give free mental therapy to BIPOC women. And we also do 1% cannabis for a cause. So I would ask all the businesses that you know and your friends to sign up to do the 1% cannabis for a cause, and that you can have a link, and 1% of your sales goes to that. Also, if you know a BIPOC business, or if you don't, look for one and have them on your shelves. And I thank the Brattleboro Co-op for having our products there. And I look forward to coming down and doing an education event and just educating people and engaging with us and other people in your community around the businesses that are here and the people like us that are here. It's a matter of funding and awareness.
Thanks, Marlena. It kind of goes back to what Amber was saying too, gatekeepings. Like, bust the gates open in any way that you can, right? So like, I think Marlena, you mentioned distributors, like do the work to find Black and Indigenous and people of color owned distributors or different, and put it out there. And I'm going to put some links in the chat because the Vermont Partnership for Fairness and Diversity, the NAACP, Black Perspective, we all keep creating these lists across Vermont of BIPOC owned businesses. And it's really difficult to be a BIPOC business when you don't have access to capital to allow you to grow, to accommodate this influx of white folks wanting to work with you. So if there are ways that you, Brattleboro Co-op, can bust open those gates that you heard both Amber and Marlena talking about, do it. And to think that you don't have power because you're not a legislator or because you're not a grant writer or because you're not a distributor, right? That's not true. You have the power of being who you are, and you can put pressure. You can get other collectives of co-ops together and be like, hey, this is an area that we need to push. Let's all do the 1% together because Zen Farms told us we need to do that, right? Thank you. Amber.
Yeah, I like what both of you are saying a lot, and I like how you're saying like you don't have to be like a wealthy person or like all these different things. And I think that like that's so much about like what Susu is about. Like I'm not rich, I don't have money like that, and neither does Naomi, but like look at what us as a community were able to create out of nothing. Like that is the gift of our ancestors, is creating something out of nothing, and that's something that all of us can do together. Like we all have ways that we can show up in community, we all have ways that we can support each other, and that's how we do this work. That's how like community and all these beautiful parts of liberation are built, by people coming together with a shared vision and all showing up the way with using our gifts. I think another thing, I think there's many ways. I think one of the things that I really want to share is like I was looking in the chat earlier and I saw when Kat asked questions about like diversity and inclusivity and stuff like that, and how the co-op's addressing that. I thought that was a great question. And then Alex was responding of how how great it is that we're able to ask these kinds of questions about racism and whatnot in our grocery stores. And I think these things are really important to look at, because I think often we don't fully understand what the experience of a Black person is like, just to do a simple thing like go to the grocery store, and like the amount of labor it takes just to go grocery shopping because of the violence and because of the things that we are constantly bombarded with on a daily basis. Like my first experience when I first moved to Vermont, like the co-op was one of the first places that I went to, and the very first time I stepped foot into the co-op, I purchased something, and before I could even walk out of the door, one of the employees ran up to me like asking to see my receipt and thinking that I stole something. Like that was my first experience of coming to the co-op. And the co-op is somewhere that now, like I shop at the co-op almost every single day. Like that's like where I spend the most time, and like the people who work there joke with me about it, because it's like, oh, you're like self-care time away from your kids, because like my life is basically spent in the co-op when I'm not working. And for me, it's like that's important, is like a lot of like one of the things that's really important to me of like why I even go there is the people. Like I see John and I see Sue and I see all these people who work at the co-op that like I connect with, or I feel like a connection with. And so like I'm not just like buying food, I'm buying like like this community relationship that's so important to me. And I think that like that is a huge way that we also kind of like invest in each other and do this work, is like what are the ways, like I think that we should also reframe the question of like what are the ways that we're bringing like working on diversity inclusion. It's like what are the ways that we are making this a less violent or harmful experience for Black and brown people? What are you actively doing as an organization to make this a safe and nourishing experience? Because that's what we're talking about. It's not about like bringing more Black people in or these things. It's like Black and brown people aren't here because they're being harmed. And that's an issue. And that's an issue in many places. And it like sounds silly to like talk about that with a grocery store, but like Black people's experience of going into any place other than their homes, usually even sometimes in their homes, because often our homes are owned by the people that are harming us, is an experience of violence and pain and suffering. And so like, what are we doing as a community to change that? What are we doing as a community to center and see the seriousness of creating safe spaces for Black and brown people? And then what are the ways that we are building relationships with the Black and brown people in our communities who shop at our stores, all of these things, and then supporting businesses, because like we are organizations and like our work is important because we're creating spaces for Black and brown people, but those relationships with the Black and brown people who are in your stores are deeply important and necessary too. And in order for them to feel safe, like the relationship and the safety and all of those things need to be present.
All right, that sermon was brought to you by the Pastor Amber Arnold. That was amazing. I hope y'all got that down. If you didn't, this is being recorded, because everything that Marlena and Amber are saying to you is exactly what, and what often comes back to us is, but I don't know how to do that. Well, we didn't know how to do what we were doing. Amber did. Amber just knew that in her heart, in her being, that this is where she needed to go. So she fumbled her way through and figured it out. Nobody gave her a roadmap. And I think oftentimes white folks expect a roadmap for us to give you a roadmap for how to deal with racism. We don't have one. Right? My dog is Black. She's preaching too. And so there's a way that we're giving you as much of a roadmap as more than we ever had. So now you have to fumble your way through it. So if you are a grant administrator, your job is now to go back to your business and say, wait, is this application too cumbersome? Do we really need all of those indicators? Do we really need that level of statistics? Or can we trust that the people who are coming to us trying to protect themselves and create sanctuary for other people of color, can we just trust that they know what they're doing after hundreds of years of surviving RBS? Can we just maybe trust that? So if you've never done that before, go ahead, say it.
I'll just add, because some might be ready to take the leap and others might need to lean. And as a former special educator, I'm all about meeting people where they're at. So those that need to lean, I would encourage them to I lost my train, hold on. You had said, tell me what you just said again. It's gonna come back to me.
About stepping into it and fumbling through it. We didn't have a roadmap for us, and we just had to kind of go through it ourselves. And so if you're a grant administrator walking into your grant place and saying, hey, we need to deal with this somehow.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So I was gonna say, if you're not ready to change the way the grant writing system is, be a resource for BIPOC businesses and individuals, organizations as a grant writer. Yes, that's part of the initiative too within our Cannabis Equity Fund, is to create a cohort of resources and beneficiaries, people that have expertise from seed to sale in all different areas that are willing and able to offer their experience for free, if you will. But it's not really for free, because you're benefiting by bringing innovative people to the area, new community that's going to last and grow and engage with one another for each other's long-term wellness, in the way that Amber and I are. More like-minded people come together. So the more of us that come with the same energy, it's for the better of everyone.
And that willingness to step into that space and be like, I don't know how to challenge my system, but I know how to help you through it. It's like another less underground railroad, right? To help mitigate and navigate systems. The other thing you can do is to be curious, right? If you don't know what to do or how to do it, asking questions, there's so much out there, right? I think about these fantastic humans, and our friend Earl, who wasn't able to make it tonight, they were able to succeed because they were willing to go out and ask the questions, to be super committed, so committed, on every level, that they navigated it. They just did it. It just, be curious. Additional, Amber, Marlena, anything that you're thinking about before I open it up to folks to be able to ask us more questions?
Yeah, I guess just one last thing. I feel like hearing you both think it or talk, speak, and just like really feeling, like perfectionism, like all these qualities of white supremacy that like can like feel so paralyzing and can like feel like this barrier between us and being able to come closer to our yes or to what we care about. Like we're wanting to say yes to liberation or to building this community or to supporting all of these incredible changes, but then there's all this kind of like internal um, experiences that are keeping us from doing that. And I think that it's really important to look at that in ourselves, because that it is important, like what you were talking about like we don't have a blueprint, we're just trying to figure stuff out, like we are going into really, really uh I don't know how to say it, like professional or like very like systems that work a very particular way, very institutional, very like research based, very like you have to speak in this certain way and like you need to pay a lawyer $5 million so that you can write something that no one understands, and then we'll pay another person another $1 trillion to read what you said and no one knows what's going on, like that kind of system. And so obviously as a normal everyday person, I have no idea what any of that stuff means, but we are very deeply like we deeply care about the work that we're doing. So even though we don't understand how those things work, we, like Marlena, me, like all these people are like, we're going to go into this place and we're just going to make stuff up and like see what happens, at least that's what I do. I'm just like, I don't know what a pitch deck is, but I'm going to come and like talk to you and like tell you all these things and like share with you what's going on. And like, maybe you'll like it, maybe you won't. I don't know what I'm doing, but like, I care about this thing and I think you would too, and I'm a human being and I know somewhere down there, you're a human being too. So like, we can like figure this out together if we can like center our humanity in this way. And so like, I think that like there's a lot of that work that we can do internally too, that has to be done internally. And it's a very personal process in order for us to all move together towards like creating these safer and more liberated spaces for all people to exist in. And I think it has a lot to do with like dismantling this idea of perfectionism or things looking a certain way and allowing ourselves to be really messy, because that's where the beautiful work comes from, is when we're willing to be messy, we're willing to make mistakes, and we're willing to just kind of like try and figure it out.
Thank you, Amber. That you're just amazing. I just appreciate being with you. I am also putting some resources. So as I'm listening to Amber and Marlena talk, I'm trying to put resources in there, like both mentioned characteristics of white supremacy culture. So I put a link in there so folks can take a look at that. I'm also putting a link to racial identity development model that was developed by William Cross in the 1970s and has been adapted. So as you're doing this internal work that Amber is saying needs to be done, you can see the progression of racial identity development over the lifetime and see maybe where you are with it, and start to get a sense of, where's your next growing edge. That being said, I want to open it up for questions. What questions do you have? You can unmute yourself and feel free to just ask questions. You can either name or just say this is a general question anyone can answer.
I have a question. How can we get involved with 100? What is it, Amber? 100 for 100 with Susu?
Oh yeah, so we at Susu just launched this fundraising campaign. It's called Give Black. And so basically our goal is to raise $100,000 in 2 months through community abundance and support. And so the idea is that we get 100 people to get 10 of their friends together, and then their 10 friends raise $100 each, which equals $1,000 per team, which then equals $100,000 to help us to fund our CSA and farm program aspect, all of the salaries and everything that goes along with that program for this coming year. And so basically if people are interested in participating in that, you could email us at info@susucommunityfarm.org. And then we have this like whole packet we made of all the stuff that you would need to get your, friends inspired. And just in transparency mode of sharing about that, I will say that talking about perfectionism and all of these things, about like 2 weeks ago, Naomi and I found out from another friend that December is the month that like organizations do fundraising and like donor appeals and all of this stuff that we had no idea about. So we were like, oh my gosh, I guess we should do something. And we kind of like in 20 minutes came up with this idea. And so that's where it was birthed out of. It was birthed out of having no idea that this is a thing and then trying to just like figure it out. And, that's how we do things and how we can all do things so that we can create cool stuff on the fly. I think I see questions in the chat from Marlena.
Yeah, I guess I'll answer that question in the chat. What's next with Zen Barn as we approach legalized recreational cannabis sales in VT? Is the question. I feel like we're always in. I tend to stay present, but it all feeds into what's next. Currently, within the Cannabis Equity Fund, myself and 2 others are heading to New Orleans for the Black Cannabis Conference, and that was thankfully fully funded, all expense paid by The Alchemist. And we did reach out to other organizations as well, and it was funny with what Amber was saying. One organization was like, well, can't just, they mentioned some other one that's predominantly white. Can't they just focus on the equity in this industry? And it's like, okay. But so Zen Barn Farms, we're planning to apply once it's available to become a vertically integrated shop. Right now we grow. We have, as some may know, a CBD dispensary, and we plan to be a distributor. So cultivate, distribute, and we also currently manufacture our tinctures, our topical salves, and edible gummies that are great for sleep. And what's really next too is to make, we really want to make Waterbury and Vermont like the hub for cannabis knowledge and wealth and wellness, just how Ben & Jerry's is known to have quality ice cream, and Cold Holler Cider Mill and Stowe Mountains. Like, we want to be a destination for cannabis wellness within from the education side, the advocacy side, and the amount of wealth that will come to it for the communities. And our generational wealth is very important for rectifying the war on drugs. And that's what the cannabis generation is about. That's what we have going on right now at Zen Barn Farms.
I see a hand up. It says Spoon Agave, but that's all I can see.
Yes, I would like to thank Amber for not being afraid to use the word capitalism, because I feel it is how we as a society define how we distribute wealth, which is at the root of virtually every social and economic problem we have, and is the one issue that can and should be uniting us all. Period.
It's true. Everyone wants to talk about racism, but no one wants to talk about capitalism. And racism is really a symptom of capitalism.
Precisely.
When you look at any ism, it's tied back to like resources, access, or change in need, right? Miscommunication and fear. But that first one is all about whether or not other people are worthy of accessing resources. We've designed systems that are all about that, controlling who gets to live and who doesn't. I realize we're at 7:30, so I just wanted to offer Amber and Marlena an opportunity. Any parting words for the folks on with us tonight that you want to leave them with?
Yeah, I'll just say thank you everyone for staying here for this meeting and listening to us and wanting to be part of creating a new way of being in community with each other. I think that's really awesome, and I'm really looking forward to seeing everyone here around because I know y'all are going to show up and we're going to create a beautiful culture together. So thank you for being willing to participate in this work with us.
Yeah, ditto, ditto. Appreciate you all. And it's nice to see some of the faces of Brattleboro. I only usually go down there on my way to Jersey, and I always make a point to stop at that deli, and that's right off the exit, and then the co-op as well to stock up. So I appreciate you all for listening.
All right. Thank you both so much for your time and your talent and your expertise. We really appreciate you. And we're glad you're in Vermont. Please stay. We'll do whatever it takes to make sure you stay here. All right. With that, I think, Sabine, I'm turning it back over to you.
Thank you, Tabitha. Thank you so much, Amber and Marlena. It's a joy to hear you and see you and think about all the possibilities that you've already started opening up for us. So thank you. Geraldine, I think.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sabine. I also would like to thank Tabitha, Marlena, and Amber. I really appreciate that you've been vulnerable with us. Marlena, when you said that, you were both speaking, so, authentically, it didn't occur to me that you were having this experience of being vulnerable in front of all of these faces. And so I really appreciate that you acknowledged that, because it really brought that to my attention. And Amber, you used that phrase, centering our humanity. That's a really powerful phrase. I'm going to take that with me for sure. So we're going to leave everyone with a video from Zen Barn Farms. It's about their equity fund. But I'd like to sort of close the annual meeting of the Brattleboro Food Co-op by reminding you all to vote. As a reminder, our voting period is a bit more than 2 weeks. It closes on Sunday, November 28th at 5 p.m. So you've got about 2 weeks. You can vote online or at the store, and be sure to ask at the store if you have questions. So I want to thank again our departing board members, Beth Nair. Need to see my notes, so hold on just a sec. Want to thank our departing board members, Beth Nair, Tamara Sten, Joe Giancarlo, and Stefan Gillum. Your contributions have really been significant. And so good night to everybody. Thanks for attending, and stay tuned for the Zen Barns video, after which this Zoom meeting will end. I've watched this video and I think you'll find it very inspiring.
The issue with cannabis was never the plant.
Music bed.
It was the people that used it. There's people that are able to make money off of this now in the open market, and there's people that are still getting arrested for being in the black market, if you will. That's that generational trauma, that disassociation that passes on. It gets down to your nerves and your cells.
It's not surprising at all
that 98% of the cannabis industry is owned by white people. The networks, the existing wealth, the encouragement to own and to operate and to run things. I mean, that's been ingrained in this country, you know, for a long time.
For generations before slavery, people were growing and learning from the land, and then that was stripped away, and so much culture and language was stripped away with that. In honor of my ancestors, I've been wanting to reconnect with the land. A way of liberation. I want to create an opportunity similar to the unique one that I have here in Vermont, with having access to land, a network of people that support this endeavor, and being able to heal generational trauma and to also create generational wealth. We were finding that there were lots of questions out there about how to access the industry. I just wanted to be able to let people know that we're here and pretty much provide that bridge to be able to access an industry that they might have legally, that they have probably already have been in for generations. I really think it's important to encourage people and to empower people to feel honor and integrity around their daily practices.
We now have right in front of us this opportunity to rebuild a whole industry that can be a lot better than some of the things we might compare it to, like the alcohol industry or the tobacco industry. Those were really built on the backs of slavery.
People that do look like me in the BIPOC community, when they see me standing behind the counter at our CBD shop, and they'll first ask, like, oh, do you work here? And when I say I am co-owner, there's this like shift in their whole body. They stand up a little straighter and smile and want to support it, because my success they view as their success. If I'm going to be successful, the only way I can be that is if the person next to me is successful as well. Be it that was stripped from Black people, I want to be able to offer that and have Black people see that that's something that can be a part of our day. It's just having ownership of it.
We have people that want to do it, and they need help to take a few steps forward. We want to be there to, you know, right away start to provide free legal support, free accounting, free marketing.
It is a plant, so we want to make sure we know how to grow it. So that would mean getting dirty, literally in the soil.
And inspire people, and then give them the tools they need to start their own businesses.
Our business is just really all about community, and the idea that it's not about doing anything alone. I hope to be like a passing of a baton. And in each leg, someone just gets through it a little faster and a little better. More knowledge is gathered, more resources are gathered. People feel more confident in their run, just like winning the race, if you will, together. And I think that's beautiful.